Hello, everyone. I'm Kelsey Lemon, Technical Marketing Manager for the Global Services team here at VMware, and I want to welcome you to our Day 2 Mastery series where we focus on providing tips and tricks to help you get the most out of the Skyline service. Today, we're going to do something special for today's webinar. It's a webinar first for the Skyline team. Today, we have Richard Harris of Rackspace, a global leader in professional and managed services for public cloud infrastructure, joining us today. He's going to share his team's firsthand experience with Skyline. And in addition to Richard, we also have Michelle Clopton and Nick Fritsch, our Skyline top guns, who's going to be monitoring our Q&A pod and answering your questions. So make sure that you use that QA option at the bottom of the screen. But before we begin, again, I just want to just thank everyone for attending. As you guys know, it's a very trying times in light of what's happening with COVID-19. And as members of our extended family, our entire team just wants to express our hope that each of you and your loved ones are safe and healthy, and when necessary, that you're receiving the care that you need. And with that, let's just get started. So, before I turn the reins over to Richard, I want to take a moment to talk about the transformation that the support experience is currently undergoing right now. It's evolving beyond the typical break-fix scenarios, and it's working its way towards more autonomic processes, where the support experience will actually be baked into the product itself, and issues are automatically resolved and reported back. And as we work towards that goal, we're in the intermediate stage, if you will, where we're giving the customer the ability to proactively see support issues before they occur with Skyline. We feel that as our solution increases in self-managing functionality, not only will your need for site-based support will decline, but you're going to also reap other benefits that Richard's going to discuss from his firsthand experience with the service. But from a high level, Skyline is a proactive support technology, meaning that it can help you avoid issues before they happen. So you don't even have the problem in the first place. Skyline helps resolve existing issues faster. So say, for example, if you have a case open with us, our tech support engineers can use Skyline to view your environment specific configurations and use data-driven analytics to speed discovery and ultimately drive faster resolution times. And speaking of environment configurations, Skyline currently supports vSphere, NSX-V, vSAN, Horizon, and vRealize Operations Manager. And this is the best part. I should also mention that Skyline is available at no additional cost for our production and premier support customers. And what's really great about this is that these capabilities that I just talked about, they're driving value to our champions, people like Richard. We're seeing that Skyline helps them avoid constantly being in that firefighting mode. They're reducing costly downtime, which is often caused by just common misconfigurations. And the increased network reliability translates into less time fixing errors. To date, Skyline has helped customers identify more than 12 million objects in their environments with potential issues. And our customers have proactively resolved more than 40% of them on their own. And when there are times when you may need to react to an issue that wasn't proactively resolved, Skyline can support you here as well through our log assist feature, which is actually 14 times faster than traditional log transfer processes. And so you're probably, asking yourself, well, how proactive support with Skyline works. And so, well, first things first, you have to install and configure a lightweight appliance called the Skyline Collector into your environment. And once the collector is installed and configured to your endpoint, it actually listens to start collecting product usage data. And then based on this data, Skyline performs a comprehensive analysis of environment details. And then finally, Skyline acts to provide those proactive findings and recommendations via a web-based portal. And speaking of data, this is actually a good segue to talk about our stance on data privacy. The collector appliance is separate from the customer environment. All data is tagged with legally identifiable customer information. No customer data is stored in the collector or shared with third parties. And for more information about that in more detail, you can go to the link seen here. And with that, now, for the star of today's webinar, I'm happy to introduce Richard Harris of Rackspace. Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kelsey, for that awesome introduction. And I want to personally thank VMware for this great tool that I'm going to be talking about today, which is VMware Skyline. A little housekeeping for me, just so everybody knows, I got a special approval to do this presentation from the office. I wanted to make sure that I had plenty of bandwidth, so I came through loud and clear. Unbeknownst to me, there's actually construction going on here at the office. So from time to time, you may hear some saws and loud bangs coming from around me, but hopefully they will be at a minimum. So next slide, please. So what I'm going to be talking about today is a little bit of background information in regards to me, and so you can know a little bit about me and understand where I'm coming from. We're also going to be talking about how easy it is to install Skyline itself and what kind of benefits Skyline offers. What exactly is it going to do for you? What benefit does it have? And we're going to follow up at the end of all of this with some Q&A for anything that y'all might have. Next slide. Now for me, my name is Richard Harris. I am a vExpert again this year, and I'm also a vCloud provider expert this year because we use vCloud Director pretty extensively within Rackspace IT. I've been at Rackspace for over 15 years now. Primarily that was on the support floor, but about 3 years ago I actually moved into our internal infrastructure. And within that internal infrastructure, I co-manage our environment. And this environment is what Rackers actually use to engage with our customers. And we even have aspects of my infrastructure that is directly engaging with the customers through various portals. A little bit of background about me and my computer industry. I have been playing with computers since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, as my dad would like to say. And he bought me a Commodore 64 whenever I was very young. And I started with that, loved it, and started learning to program very basic stuff on it. Later moved to Microsoft DOS, and moved into Windows 3.1.1 and eventually became certified in all things Microsoft. And then several years ago now, I started to adopt a vCenter and ESX 3.0 back whenever it was first hitting the market, and just absolutely fell in love with the VMware product. Since then, I've now become completely OS agnostic. I don't care what the OS is, simply give it to me and I will do everything I can to make it work within the VMware environment. Our infrastructure within the Rackspace internal IT, we have 6 primary data centers across the globe. All of them are completely independent configurations. Within those, we have on average 600 hypervisors and 4,000 VMs. We have hypes that come and go depending on company acquisitions and department acquisitions that go on. Within our infrastructure, we're running vCenter 6.7 Update 3F, and NSX 6.4.4, vCloud Director 9.5, and we are running the very latest Skyline, which is 2.3.0.2. As I mentioned, we do frequently inherit teams and orgs and other companies, which definitely plays into why Skyline is such an impact for us as a team, and you'll see why as I carry on through this presentation. We don't use something like Horizon. Horizon's a great tool, and it does actually integrate within VMware Skyline, but we don't use it. But we do have Skyline tied into our VR Ops. Next screen, please. So the OVA appliance, as Kelsey mentioned, is extremely easy to deploy. It doesn't take much time at all. It's 600 megabytes in size, but it does require 87 gigabytes of full disk space as a VM once you have it deployed. As mentioned, it only takes between 15 and 30 minutes max to get it actually deployed. Basic vCenter permissions are required, and there are definitely some firewall ACLs that need to be open. I would recommend doing both of these prior to actually deploying the OVA. On the firewall ACLs, you're going to need port 443, 7444, and for the VAMI, you're going to need 5480. in order to make this function properly. Now on the 443, that's actually a bidirectional, as I have found out with VMware, and that comes in later on in this presentation in regards to logs. Whenever you initially deploy it, you're going to just sign in to the primary interface, which is just HTTPS : // and then your IP address. And within that, you're going to be able to configure your vCenter connector, your NSX connector, Horizon, vRealize operations, etc. The different aspects that you can actually tie this into. Now, I mentioned the VAMI interface, 5480. That is where you can actually go in and work with the appliance itself. You can reboot the appliance, shut down the appliance. You can also update the appliance, or you can even configure it to auto update. You can change repo locations and those types of things. You can also update the host name of the appliance and what IP address it is using. There are definitely lots of installation articles out there, several dozen. Mine happens to be located at nuthouse.us, and just look for deploying VMware Skyline. This was built on 2.1, the article, but the same information still applies. I do have one item there. It's the fourth item down. NSX integration, as of right now, requires some admin access, so just keep that in mind. You don't have to integrate it into NSX, but we have. I definitely would recommend it because it does give you recommendations within the NSX configuration for vulnerability as well. Next slide. So after you get this thing installed, it will tell you that it's going to take up to 24 hours to start collecting data and spit out the results of that collection. Now, I personally found that that was significantly less time. I actually was sitting about an hour before the advisor started giving me information back on my configuration. So if you do install it and there's a delay, just understand that there is a time delay. Now, we do have this installed and configured globally across all of our DCs. So we have 3 DCs that are located in the States, and then we have one that's in London, one that's in Hong Kong, and one that's in Sydney, and all of them work flawlessly. We've not had any communication issues going across those ocean links, and everything has been great for us. So whenever we log into that advisor, the first thing we're going to display is the dashboard, which is on the next slide and gives us a quick overview. And with this, you're going to see our environment. Here you can see the 6 vCenters that I was talking about and the 581 hypervisors. Again, our hypes vary as we bring in, consolidate, and move out different hypervisors, over 4,000 VMs. The findings column is the one that we really like a lot, because this is where it starts to get into the nitty-gritty. This is where you are going to start seeing a quick overview as to how many vulnerabilities are within your configuration. And as you see here, we had at this time 8 critical, 18 moderate, and 1 trivial. Now underneath that, it's actually broken out into various categories. And these categories are going to give you a great snapshot of, okay, well, my network looks pretty good, but my compute or security are areas that I need to really focus on. For example, if we're setting up a roadmap for the next quarter, then this will give us a great idea of where we can spend our time on that roadmap to get to our end goal, which is a more secure environment. The next column over, you're going to see the log assist, and this is going to show you any open SRs that have actually had a log assist request come through your Skyline appliance, which is something I'm going to be getting to a little bit later in this presentation. And of course, underneath that, we have the release notes of the Skyline product. On the right-hand side, under support requests, this is going to show you any active support requests that you currently have open, which is a really nice thing because it's a snapshot, quick and easy to get to. And if you click those links, it'll actually open the service request portal for you. Now, this particular screenshot is actually from the admin console, and they do have a newer feature that has recently been released, which is the Skyline user account. And the user account is something that you would give to a lower level sysadmin that is going to be able to come in here and look at your findings and recommendations, and you don't want them playing with the configurations and who all it's actually talking with. Next slide. So the next thing we're going to be going over is the column I said was the most impactful for us, which is the findings and recommendations, which is shown here on the next slide. So on the findings and recommendations, you're going to have all the vulnerabilities that the Skyline product and team have found within your environment. And this is going to give you general vulnerability assessment across your configuration. Things such as missing path redundancy, missing vulnerability patches, something that you can actually apply to either the vCenter or NSX or an actual hypervisor. And it's also going to give you issues around more complex things. Now, I'm going to be talking about this pretty extensively, and that's Spectre and Meltdown. I'm still amazed. Spectre and Meltdown is a very old issue. Most of us are very well versed with it. But what's interesting, as we acquire companies and as we acquire other teams, we actually have found a trend to where not necessarily everything has been taken care of the way that it's supposed to have been taken care of. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as we move through this presentation. Next slide. So I mentioned earlier something that would impact a lot of people, and that's the storage path redundancy. So we recently went through a major DC migration where we literally picked up an entire DC, moved it across Hong Kong to a different section of Hong Kong, and plunked everything down and hooked it all up. Well, we actually had, as you can tell, one of our hypervisors that didn't have fully redundant paths. Now, the interesting thing about vCenter is it usually flags all this information. However, if a hypervisor powers up without redundant pathing, then there is a chance that the alarm doesn't sound. And it simply goes, okay, well, this path isn't supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be redundant. So it never generates an alarm because it's not a path failure. It just wasn't there whenever the hype came online. That's actually what happened here in this case. But VMware Skyline recognized that and said, hey, this is not an optimal situation. You have a redundant path failure. Now, if we actually click on that redundant path failure, it brings up the next slide, which is going to show us some additional information about vulnerabilities. Now, on this particular vulnerability, we can actually see that I'm sorry, I do apologize. I will go into that slide in just a second. So if we scroll further down, which is the slide we're on now, the Spectre Meltdown here. This is, as I mentioned, something I'm going to be talking about. And the reason I'm going to be talking about Spectre Meltdown is because there is a multifaceted way to resolve Spectre Meltdown within environments. First, we have the physical layer, which is going to be BIOS patching on our physical hardware. Then we have ESXi updates that have to be applied to our hypervisors. And then we have VM hardware layer and tools upgrades that have to go into our environment in order to resolve this situation. And Skyline does a beautiful job of capturing all of those different items for you, and it lets you know those issues. Now, this particular one, if we click on this one, which will bring up our findings, then it's actually going to show you a little bit more detail about the Spectre Meltdown. So the first items that we're going to see here on the drilled down information is the description. What exactly is this vulnerability and what problems does it bring into it? And for this one, we can see it's a guest mitigation for branch target injection, which is the Spectre Meltdown issue. We also see what type of risk, if we don't take an action, what exactly is this going to do if we don't do anything? And for this, obviously, it's a security risk. It leaves a exploitable hole within our environment. Then it gives us the all-seeing eye, the thing that we're most concerned about, which is how do we resolve this under the recommendations. So for this one, we can see that we need to upgrade to hardware version 9 or later. And that's the most important thing. Go back one screen for me, Kelsey. Thank you. So at the bottom here, we also have the helpful links. And this is where we can get some additional information on the actual vulnerability itself. And it gives us, the typical VMware article, which gives us all the information that we need. Now, you'll also note that there's an export button up at the top. If you click that, you can actually get this in a CSV format to give you a little bit more detail and make something that is easier for us to action as engineers, so we can go and drop this into Jira's, etc., in order to get it resolved. Now, of these particular things, just so you know, these 280 objects that are affected, this is actually inherited from a purchase of a company, and these VMs were actually hardware version 7. So we were able to take this information, go to those VMs, and let those people know that, hey, we need to take this from hardware version 7 to hardware version 9 in order to ensure that you are Spectre compliant. Now on the next screen, this is an older screenshot, but this is from obviously last year, but this actually shows you that this is an ESXi layer Spectre meltdown issue, which is the multifaceted aspect of the Spectre meltdown. And here you see that we have 3 options with these 2 affected objects. With this, we can go to Express Patch 13 for ESXi 5.5. For ESXi 6.0, you can go to patch 6, or patch 2 for ESXi 6.5. So that's the nice thing about it, is not only does it tell you all these different aspects that are vulnerable within it on this particular issue, but it also gives you different options that you can use to resolve this underlying issue. On the next screen, a nifty little feature is the ability to mute findings. Let's say, for example, you are using an external solution to back up your NSXV, and you just don't want to see this thing on your splash screen for your findings anymore. Well, it's extremely simple. You click on the checkbox and click Mute Findings, and then it mysteriously goes away. And you don't have to see it on your primary finding page anymore. Now, once again, you'll see right to the left of that, there's an export button. That export button, if you don't have anything checked, it exports everything. All the stuff that are on your normal findings page are going to be exported as a CSV. But let's say you just want 3 or 4 of these exported. You simply click that little tick box on the ones that you're concerned about, and you will be able to click export, and it will take it and export it to a CSV. Now, what happens if you accidentally mute something that you didn't intend on muting, which I will admit I've done that before? Well, at the top of the next screen, you can see that there is a tab for muted findings. So you click on muted findings, you can go over there and say, oopsie, this is the one that I actually accidentally muted. So you put a tick box on it and then click the unmute finding buttons. And as soon as you do, it adds it back to the unmuted findings. Now there's a dialog box that says, hey, are you sure you want to mute this? Or are you sure you want to unmute this? So it actually requires a couple of clicks to do it. So just make sure that you read those dialog boxes. The next screen, which goes into the upgrade recommendations. This is my personal favorite section of it. And there's a definite reason why, which don't change it yet, but it's on the next screen. So under this section, you can see that we have vCenter upgrade recommendations, and we also have hypervisor upgrade recommendations. Now, this thing actually takes into account the interoperability matrix. And you can see that on this older slide, we were running 6.7 update 2. And it gave us some findings to address so that we could actually resolve some vulnerabilities. Below that, you will also see that we have both minor and major version upgrades for ESXi itself. Now, you'll notice on the upgrade version on the right, there's Show Details. And if we click on that, it brings up the next screen. And this is the part I absolutely adore. This pops up the full interoperability matrix for you. So we've all been to the interoperability matrix if we are part of the upgrade team. We have to click all these checkboxes. Well, I've got this product, and oh, I've got, you know, NSXV, and I have vSAN. And we have all of these objects that are in here. So let me add all of these to this operability matrix, which is going to take sometimes quite a while. Sometimes it's easy, but sometimes it's not. Well, this screen does all of that for you. And as they add more complexity to Skyline, more and more things are popping up within this interoperability matrix. So it's really nice. And we actually used this earlier this year to do our vCenter upgrades, which is why this is an older screenshot and shows update 2, because I don't have this screen to show you anymore because we utilized it. So absolute wonderful feature that came with Skyline. So on the next screen, the item I'm going to be talking about next is the OSR library, which is the operational summary report. Now, on the next screen, you'll see the OSR library tab. And within that tab, you're going to be getting, as you can see, about every 15 days, a report is going to run for your configuration. And within this report, you're going to have 2 ways that you can get it. You can get it from just a docx, which is a Microsoft Word file, or you can get a zip file. Now, the zip file contains the docs file, but it also contains that export of all those as a CSV. So all of your findings are going to be exported as a CSV so that you can go in there and gather all of this. So what do these reports do for you? They allow you to take the docs file and hand it to leadership or hand it to your compliance team. And then the CSVs are going to allow you to create execution plans and to go in and remediate your findings. So let's actually bring up the docs file, which is the next screen. So as I mentioned, this is something that you can give to leadership. And the reason I say that is because of the professional nature of this report. It's not a generic looking thing. It actually has some really good bits so that leadership can understand some of the issues that you may be encountering within your configuration. And it will put some graphs in front of them so they actually understand the ramifications of either patching or not patching, the criticality, the moderate aspect of it, or even if it's a trivial issue. On the next screen, we are given our deployment summary. Within here, it tells you all of your collectors. It's going to give you your vCenters, NSX managers, anything that you have this tied into is going to be listed out here. And as you can see, it actually has the version, including the exact build number that you're on. It will also give you a detailed inventory of your configuration. And as you can see here, the 4,088 VMs are showing up. You'll see that we're very resource pool and folder heavy within this environment. And that goes back to the fact that we use vCloud Director within the internal Rackspace or within internal IT Rackspace. And the nice thing about this is it also allows your leadership to see that the size of your configuration is complex. And so they can see it right here within their this amazing document. On the next screen, we are given the proactive findings global within your estate. Now you see here that we have 3 that are critical for storage, 3 that are considered moderate, and 0 trivial. On the right-hand side, we have this nifty little table that actually breaks that up into DCs. I would like to point out here that if you look on the left, the moderate is a roll-up. So the moderate actually is showing 3 on the left-hand side, but on the right-hand side, we're actually showing 10 total. And that's because it's 10 total across all of the DCs. But since it's a roll-up on the left, it's only going to show 3. And I actually think this is a really good thing because sometimes whenever we present these things to leadership, if they hear we have 10 vulnerabilities, but it's stretched across 6 different data centers, then you can say, well, we technically only have 3 of these vulnerabilities, but it does span our 6 DCs. That makes it sound a little bit less knee-jerk reaction to our leadership. On the next screen, this is where we actually get into the proactive findings within each one of these vulnerabilities. And this one happens to be the storage path redundancy, which I mentioned earlier. And this will give you the issue as to what the problem actually is. And you can see this includes 4 links to PDFs, and these PDFs go into best practices on how you should set up your storage, why redundant paths are such a big thing, so that your leadership or your resolutions team, if you've actually passed this off to a team who's going to be actioning this, can understand what the underlying issue is. You can see there's more issue description on the right-hand side and some additional recommendations. On the next screen, we're going to be talking about Log Assist. Now, Log Assist is what we're going to be using when we open an SR. If you've ever opened an SR, then you'll know that almost always the first thing that VMware Engineer asks you to do is upload a bundle. That process can go very quickly. That process can be time-consuming and tedious. I definitely have configurations that don't have direct access from my management gear as far as the Windows devices that I'm getting into that will allow me to export those. But with those firewall ACLs that we set up in the beginning, this will actually allow all of that to traverse through the Skyline appliance itself. So on the next screen, we get an initial screen here, which will allow us to initiate a log transfer. Now, there's a few different ways that we can do these log transfers. One, we can be proactive, and as soon as we have the SR generated and the SR number, if we already know that they're going to be asking for a log bundle, we can go in here and let's say it's for our hypervisor, and we want to go ahead and include our vCenter logs. Well, as you can see, there's 2 different tick boxes here. We can actually tick those, click next, and go through a wizard, which will actually complete the wizard, and within that, you will generate, or you'll specify the SR itself, which will automatically attach it to the SR. However, on the next screen, if you're like me, and you don't want to do it unless the engineer actually requests it, then they can generate an SR request or a log bundle request through the Skyline appliance. So how does that process work? Whenever you initially create the SR with VMware, specify in there that, hey, I have the VMware Skyline appliance. If you need to get a log bundle, let us know through a log transfer request. Now, this transfer request will come to you via an email from the Skyline appliance, and it says, hey, Chris has requested a log bundle transfer request from VMware. Please log into the appliance to approve it. So you log in here, you can see, yes, it is from Chris. You can see the SR, confirm that it's from the correct one. You just simply click the green checkbox. It goes to the vCenter, and the hypervisor generates those log bundles and ships them off for you. However, if you're all about automation, there's even a trickier way and a more slick way that you can get around this. Within the settings of the Log Assist, you can actually enable automatic log transfer. Since log transfers are only going to be coming from VMware, then it shouldn't be a problem in most instances to enable that automated feature. So they simply say, Skyline appliance, I need a log for this hypervisor, or for your vCenter, or for both, or from your NSX. And whenever the log transfer comes request, Skyline says, okay, I'm configured to automatically allow these log transfers, ship the logs. So it bundles it up and ships it off for you, and you don't have to do anything. You kick back and wait for the engineers to start analyzing that log bundle and get back with you. Now on the next screen, this gives us a little bit of information as to what I was referring to earlier. If you remember, one of the first things I said is to make sure that you set up your firewall ACLs for communication between Skyline and VMware. And as you can see, I actually have 2 failed requests here, and that is because the ACLs were not set up correctly. My 2 that were completed were going through a firewall pair that were properly configured, and I had one that looked like it was set up correctly, but as I found out it wasn't, so we went back, got some ACLs set up, and was able to get that properly configured. On the next slide, just a thank you slide. Thank you for attending very, very much. Really appreciate it. So that is VMware Skyline and how it impacts Rackspace internal IT. We use it very regularly. We get the 15-day reports. I go through those reports. We log into the portal so we can go and see what's happening with our estate and get various assessments. We even have our TAM who actually reviews that. And if he sees something that we don't even see, our TAM personally emails us within the Rackspace IT and says, hey, I happen to see this on your report. You may want to go check it out. Oh, wow, thank you. Even I hadn't checked that yet. So it's a wonderful, powerful tool. And one of the things that I definitely am looking forward to is that autonomic feature that Kelsey was mentioning earlier. And there are definitely environments that I have that if a vulnerability is there, I want Skyline to go in and remediate those configurations. I want it to be able to go and make sure that it's as secure as it can possibly be. Now, there's other sections I don't want that on, but the vast majority of the estate, I do want that automatic type feature, things that I don't have to worry about and let me sleep better at night. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead and pass it back off to Kelsey. Thank you all very much for listening in to what I had to say.
Again, thanks, Richard. It was a pleasure having you present today and share your experience with the service. And with that, like Richard said, this is going to conclude today's webinar. But again, obviously, no webinar would be complete without a call to action. So if you're not already using Skyline, I encourage you all to adopt on the spot and start using it today. To do so, all you have to do is just go to the Get Started link on this page to install Skyline. And we even have a way to test drive Skyline. Simply go to the hands-on lab link and you can try it out in our sandbox environment. You can also visit the other URLs listed here for additional information, including FAQs. You can also visit the Skyline page in the Learning Zone to register for upcoming events. You can watch recorded webinars and view our day 2 videos and other content. And if you still have questions, Skyline, I'm happy to say, has a moderated community, and we encourage you all to check that out. And with that, we're going to set aside a couple of minutes to see if there's any additional questions that we can answer for you all.
We've had a lot of good questions come through, Kelsey. I don't know if we have any unanswered ones, but we can definitely wait a minute or two here and see if anyone has any additional questions that we can answer live. They type them into the Q&A box.
I know you and Nick have been furious at getting those questions answered, so thanks for that.
Yeah, we've had a lot of really good questions come through.
Hey, Richard, this is Josh. I'll kick it off with the questions. I've just been curious listening to you. This is an excellent presentation. What is your estimate of productivity gains, time savings when it comes to using some of the features that you covered? Can you give an estimate on how you're seeing things play out and get ahead of things?
Definitely. We have seen a direct impact on the vulnerabilities specifically. Obviously, we have some with the interoperability matrix. The difference between going and selecting a lot of stuff and remembering, oh, I have this product with the environment, or I have this product within the environment. Having that on the interoperability matrix is a really slick thing that allows for very fast and oops, I forgot that. You don't have to worry about forgetting it because it's on that slide or on that page. The vulnerabilities, though, is something that it's not even really something I can calculate. And the reason I say that is because of that storage path redundancy. It got ahead of it before it was a problem. So that is truly a proactive issue for us, that it went and directly impacted us. Because let's face it, we all have storage processors that reboot for various reasons, or we have an upgrade to a storage processor that needs to take place, or a switch dies within the fabric. We all hope it doesn't, but sometimes it does. Because it went and did a proactive research and gave us that proactive information, we went from having downtime unbeknownst to us, and let's face it, it's probably going to happen in the middle of the night when we don't want to get a phone call, versus we knew about it ahead of time. We were able to get in front of it, and we were able to address that situation without it ever causing any downtime. And that means our our customers aren't impacted. By that, I mean not only our internal customers, but I also mean our external customers. They don't feel the impact of it. So that's why a big portion of it is not something I could technically calculate at this point. But as far as proactive findings that we know about, it is giving us direct solutions. For example, Spectre meltdown issue. I had to spend countless hours researching Spectre and meltdown. Quite frankly, I probably spent a good month to 2 months whenever that first became a big issue of research. And there was article after article after article all across the web. And it wasn't just from VMware. It was, the Windows guest OS, the Linux guest OS, the hardware versions themselves. And to actually have a big portion of that now already available within the portal where I just click those links and those links automatically take me to the article, that's so much easier. Now I don't have to go search the database from VMware, the knowledge base there. I don't have to go to Google and search for different stuff. It's all available for me right there in that splash screen.
Fantastic, thank you.
All right, and with that being said, I don't see any additional questions in the queue. And with that, Michelle, I think it's okay to go ahead and close it out. And again, thanks everyone for attending today's webinar, and look for future webinars.